So I stuck my needle into my sewing to go check my phone, and I just kept stitching.
Hi, welcome to another Snappy Dragon costuming video, and this one's going to be a little bit different because this is going to be the first of my major shelter-in-place quarantine. Have some fun things to work on in between all the sewing of masks that I've been doing. I'm going to be making a 14th century kirtle. This is based and inspired on a meme I saw going around Facebook, which I will place here, explaining all of the ways that life right now is resembling life in the 14th century. Like, suddenly, sewing and baking bread are very important skills. There's a plague ravaging the land. Everybody is working from home except from sailors. After seeing that, I kind of just decided, you know what, I could do with a hand stitching project that's like, nice and relaxing in between all of the industrial kind of machine sewing I'm doing to get all these masks out. Why don't I make myself a 14th century kirtle? I was thinking about doing that this spring anyways. I'm drafting my own pattern for this. I could buy a pattern, but it seems like 14th century kirtles were fairly simple garments. You could either even just make one out of like rectangles and triangular gores and then sleeves like this. I've decided to go for a little bit of a more fitted cut, and I'm going to have it lace up the center front. So I referred to a lot of different tutorials to draft this. I used Morgan Donner's video, I used Elin Abrahamson's videos, and I just looked at a lot of random blogs around the internet. I'll do my best to link the ones that I found most useful. This is going to be a more casual vloggy sort of video. I'm not going to do a lot of the really formal time lapses, especially because you don't need to sit here and watch half an hour of me backstitching long kirtle pieces together. Let's see how this goes.
We've been inside for about 2 weeks now, and I have been sewing masks like nobody's business. This isn't as many as it looks like, but it's still a lot. I've made a mock-up. I took 2 rectangles, and I sewed shoulder seams together, and I sewed straight side seams, and I put it on my body, and I started just pinning the fabric to fit me. So this is where that's ended up. Instead of pinning the front shut, I've spiral laced it using a tapestry needle. It worked pretty well. It's pretty comfortable. It tells me that like maybe I need a little bit more room in the front, maybe I don't. As for the back, the one problem that's going on right now is I have a very asymmetrical spine. The back seam, it's not actually sitting over my spine right now. I have taken apart that earlier mock-up. I traced along all of the seams on both sides with a marker so I knew where they were, ripped all the seams, cut out along my marks, transferred that all to paper, and then made patterns marking them mock-up the first. I need to figure out whether some of the inconsistencies in the left and right side of this pattern are due to my personal greater than average levels of asymmetry, or whether I just draped it wrong. So here's the back right. Most of my asymmetry comes from a 30-degree curve in my spine, and it's kind of in like the shoulder to waist area. The left side, that's a much more like even curve for the center back seam. But this, there's that dip in the middle. So I think what I'm going to do is make another mock-up with 2 of the back left pieces for the back. I also have a separate front right and front left. The center back seam wasn't actually centered in my back. So I'm thinking that's what this could be coming from, and that's why I'm not just leaving it be. Here is mock-up the second. I have definitely written straighten here. As I was moving, the lacing is twisting to the side a little bit here, so I think I needed to straighten out that edge. I'm going to be adding a little bit to the center front just because the lacing holes aren't going to be like right up against the actual edge of the kirtle. They're going to be like 1/2 inch in. The back seam is a lot more like actually on my spine now, where it should be, which is good. We needed to alter the shoulder seam even on one side. Up here, that's changed a little bit. I did not film the subsequent 2 or 3 body mock-ups, nor the 4 or 5 sleeve mock-ups out of sheer frustration. I tried using symmetrical front pieces and that worked well. The issue was the arm size and sleeves. Resources on medieval sleeve setting point out that the arm size needs to be high in the armpit and the sleeve seam goes at the back of the arm, but often stop there. It's probably my lack of experience that means I need more detailed instructions than that, but it is what it is, and it took me several rounds of drafting, fitting, and massaging the sleeve head and arm side to make it fit. My only advice is, do this with another sewist to help fit, which I couldn't. Do your sleeve and arm side draping as part of your first mock-up, and leave more material than you think you'll need when cutting away excess. Once I had well-fitted mock-ups, I drew along all of my pinned or sewn lines in marker, Remove the stitching and pins, cut along those lines, and transfer the patterns to paper. Red marker was used for the outline or seam line, plus a 5/8 inch seam allowance in green. I used a gridded plexi ruler connecting dots around the curves. These pieces only extend to the high hip, but straight lines will be drawn downwards from these points and triangular gores added to form a skirt when I cut out the actual material. I have once again raided the engineer roommate's tool chest for my costuming project, and this time I borrowed, with permission, the 4-foot long level to use as a straight edge. I managed to cut out the body pieces of the kirtle out of this super wiggly linen. This was at least a 2 or 3 hour process, marking and cutting them all out. Extremely stressful because this fabric, I do my best to get it on grain and mark everything out and square everything up every way I know how, and it just will not stay. And even if I draw a thread, then I can get about one straight line out of it, and then I'm just off grain again. This rectangle is going to become the triangular gores for the kirtle to go in between those rectangular below the waist body pieces. Each one of the gores is going to be 24 inches wide at the bottom, and then 34.5 inches long, flat top to bottom, not along the side edges, otherwise it would be too short in the middle, I think. I've folded that rectangle in half, so it's 48 inches wide total, folded over to 24. I need to get 4 triangles out of this. One of them is going to have a seam down the middle. So I've marked 12 inches there, and then drawn from that way to the corner. That's going to be one of my triangles with the fold down the center right now. And then I pivoted from that point to the other corner. That's going to be 2 more triangles that are currently laying flat, and then the 4th triangle is going to come from there. That's going to be the center front and have a seam down the middle to allow for lacing. I need to just have a cup of tea and some dinner after I'm done with this, because my lower back is about to kill me. Here's the sleeve pattern that was so tricky. With the sleeve seam at the back of the arm, the sleeve head is like an S-curve. There are detailed instructions for how to draft this in the Medieval Tailor's Assistant book, which I predictably did not find until after I had struggled mightily. They address just about all of the confusion I ran into, so I think they'll guide you far better than I could. I've sewn all of the body seams with a backstitch and left openings for the gores. I added that extra 1/2 inch at the front so I'd have somewhere to put the eyelets, but I'm thinking maybe I didn't need to and I just needed to move the eyelets inward, because there's a lot of extra fabric here. There's at least 1.5 inches of extra fabric that I'll probably be removing from the front. When I went to my thread drawer, I was down to 2 spools of mostly matching but almost out dark green thread. At the suggestion of the Medieval Tailor's Assistant book, I've actually started pulling apart this piece of cabbage into the threads. These are linen, they're not ideal quality, they've got some slubs, and they're gonna have to be waxed to be able to use, but I waxed my Gutermann sew-all anyways, just because it makes it easier to hand sew with. So hopefully this will get me through until the actual new thread I've ordered gets here. It's gotten warm out enough for me to sit outside on the balcony and stitch. So I'm gonna sit out here and watch whatever silly historical drama Netflix has to offer for background noise and keep working on stitching one of these gores in. But about halfway done, I'm doing them with a running back stitch, and I've switched over to that reclaimed linen thread. It's working pretty well so far. No, Past V, you are a liar. The thread in question was a slubby disaster which broke despite thorough waxing and struggled to move through the fabric. By the end of the afternoon, I gave up, and I cannot recommend this to anyone. One day and one evening into sewing this, and I have managed to assemble 3 out of 4 skirt gores, the body, the shoulder seams, and I've also stitched the sleeve seams down to a little bit past the elbow where I'll probably need to start buttoning them. Unfortunately, there is a good chunk of that stitching that I'm probably going to have to undo. I put the side gores in too low. You see how they're just completely folding up on themselves instead of expanding? When I try to bring the kirtle closed across the front, there's really not very much room here. I think the fullness really needs to start at least another inch higher, so there's just more room to go around the hip bones. Thankfully, these were sewn in with a running back stitch, so it's not going to take that long, but it is still frustrating to have to rip out and then redo a bunch of hand sewing when I'm running low on thread. I feel like a significant amount of my sewing advice is some variation of please be smarter than me, because remember how I said that the back gore seemed to be fine, but it was the side gores that was causing the problem? Guess what I just managed to do? Yep, I went and got the seam ripper and managed to seam rip out the one skirt gore that was completely fine. So I would consider just sewing that back in by machine, except I don't even have enough thread right now to thread the machine. I put it back on, I've kind of checked out the side gores, and I've actually made a mark for where they should be, which is about 2.5 inches higher than where they are. I finally remembered, what pins are for. The side ones have been moved up to a lot more like hip bone / belly button level. This is looking a lot better. Like, it's tight, but it's meant to be tight to right about hip bone level and then flare. So I'll have the freedom of movement I need. The fit is okay. The front is no longer trying to ride up like nobody's business. I'm gonna say that's problem solved. Once again, don't be like me. And in the hopes of avoiding any other fitting surprises, I've just pinned the sleeves in. And I got a fitting surprise, but maybe not a bad one, just a confusing one. Here's the left sleeve. This went together exactly as I patterned it. The sleeve fit the arm side, everything went as expected. It seems to fit fine, I have full freedom of motion, everything's working okay. Now the right sleeve. It looks pretty much the same. It's hitting at the same place on the shoulder point, the arm side is working just fine, full freedom of movement, blah blah blah. I had to massage about 1.5 inches of fabric out of the top of the sleeve head on this one. Like, when I take this off and turn it inside out again, you'll see that I've basically removed 1.5 inches of that because I was trying to fit too much sleeve into not enough sleeve head. I have no idea how that happened because these pattern pieces look pretty much the same. Here is all of that extra sleeve head that I massaged out of the right sleeve. I'm gonna leave it in place for now, and I probably won't even sew the sleeves in for a while. I'm gonna go back to hand stitching those skirt gores instead, and maybe see about placing the front gore. I'm gonna leave the sleeves for another little while until I figure out what on earth is going on with these sleeve heads, and if I need to care. I am taking a little break. I'm gonna have a lunch snack thing. I'm gonna have some citron ginger tea. I'm gonna keep watching costume videos. And then I might go for a little costume constitutional walk thingy and dress up and do my hair. It's really, really warm and beautiful out. I think it's at least 70. It's super sunny. So I'm thinking Regency probably, unless I decide it's too warm even for that. And I'm just gonna wear a cute, flippy, modern sundress. Finished stitching in the sleeves, and I still have zero idea what was up with the arm size being different sizes. Now that I've stitched in both of the sleeves and put them on, I can tell there's some slight differences, but honestly they look pretty similar, they're comfortable, so I'm just not gonna question it unless it leads to more problems later down the line. I have thread on the way, including buttonhole twist for all the buttonholes and eyelets, and I was out of what I had until I found this, which is the really kind of not so great stuff that you get in these drugstore sewing kits. So now I've pinned the center front gore in. This one I left kind of open at the top because the lacing's going to come down through the middle. I even left some tail thread there because I don't know if I'll have to either rip out stitches or add more. And just match these up to the same point on either side. Then I can plot out where the lacing holes need to go. It's actually starting to look like a kirtle. I pinned the front closed to get an idea of the fit. There was a ton of extra fabric at the front, which I suppose I shouldn't be surprised about. Now I'm gonna take these pins out, cut away this excess, and then I can start stitching on the facings. This eyelet, so pretty and so perfect, but I'm having to rip it out because I forgot to put the proper curve inwards above the bust points into the front line of the kirtle. Why? Here is where I am at with this kirtle. So I haven't worked on this for a while, like a couple weeks, because I was waiting for some thread to show out in the mail. I was trying to color match online by little swatches. The thread I got is just not a usable color match. That is a very different shade of dark green, and it's just not working. I also tried working up eyelets with this, because this is like heavy top stitch buttonhole thread, and that's what that was for, and they just did not come out well. I sewed about a gajillion eyelets yesterday, and I did them with some embroidery floss I had split in half, so 3 threads instead of 6. And that worked relatively well, except the thing is now I'm out, and the only other dark green I have is a slightly different shade that doesn't match quite as well. So I guess I'll have slightly unmatchy buttonholes. They're reinforced onto just like a doubled over facing of self linen to give them some more strength. And now I've got to do the sleeve fastenings. I've hemmed each sleeve with a little felled hem. This linen is very, very kind about felling, so you can kind of just grab 1 or 2 threads with your stitch off of this side, and it won't actually show really through to the other side of the weave very much. So it doesn't matter that my thread color is not a perfect match. I need to get buttonholes on these sleeves, and I need to get buttons on these sleeves. One side of the sleeve gets a little teeny felled hem, and then the buttons get sewed not here on the outside of the sleeve, but right on the edge. Then the other side gets just a facing of self fabric probably, and then buttonholes sewn through that very close to the edge. I am sewing ball buttons out of cloth right now. They look like this, little spherical dudes. They're made out of a little circle of self fabric. I ended up not using the tutorial in the Medieval Tailor's Assistant. I found a different one online that's got a method I like better, and I will link that in the description. You start with gathering stitches very close to the outside edge. They don't have to be tiny, but they also shouldn't be massive. Once you finish your gathering stitches, you pull them in, so you end up with a little pouch-shaped situation like that, and then you sort of fan it out flat. According to the tutorial, I found that there's some kind of cute name for this in quilting. I don't know anything about quilting, so I'm just gonna call it this little flat situation. And take a little back stitch in one of the folds just to lock the gathers. There we go. Then, to really get this button into a nice solid ball, you sew a second row of gathering stitches as close to the edge through 2 layers as you can, like so. You come back to your first gathering stitch and then pull these in like before. These ones tend to take a little bit more doing, so give it a good pull, but make sure you don't break your thread, because then you have to redo this whole bit again. And you can see how it's starting to turn spherical and ball shaped. I'll just take a few stitches, like 4 or 5, through the ends, pull them tight, go in different directions. You don't need to catch a ton of fabric here, just enough that the ends really stay tugged in nice and firmly. Here is a little finished spherical button. I'm gonna need about 2 dozen of these, so I've got some stitching ahead of me. Buttonholes are happening. I've finally sort of maybe gotten the hang of them enough that I feel comfortable trying to do one on camera. As you can see, it took about the first, 8 or 9 or 10, and I've got 10 of these dudes left to do. First, a small slit is cut in both layers of fabric. Then, I insert the needle through the back and out the opening between the 2 layers, and begin working a buttonhole stitch, wrapping the thread around behind the needle. I pull these tight horizontally rather than upwards, so the knot sits at the inside of the buttonhole. This is the last hecking buttonhole. At least I dearly hope it is. And it is almost done. I am sure any proper medieval seamstress would look at these and be rightly ashamed, but they'll work, I think. I saved the last little button so I could show you guys how I'm putting them on. To attach the ball buttons, I used that wrongly colored top stitching thread, first passing the needle through the button and then the edge of the sleeve opening. I made several fairly loose stitches, then wrapped the thread around to form a shank before tying the whole thing off. I've just finished leveling the hemline, and I've done this on the body using my usual trick with a yardstick, measure the shortest point that I have to match to, or where I want the hem to be, put a piece of blue tape on it at that level, and then basically measure around every point on the skirt to make sure it falls there. This one was complicated because it falls in so many different interesting folds. There's so many gores, some of them all came out different lengths. If I actually took a measuring tape to this, it's all gonna be different lengths, like the front where it's relatively flat, the side where it has to go over a hip curve, the back where it has to go over my butt. I think leveling on the body is the way to go for things like this. So now I've got this done, I can actually cut away all the excess and hem that skirt, and then I just have about 10 yards of felling left to do. The skirt was hemmed with a felling stitch or whip stitch, as was the neckline off camera. The seam allowances needed to be left free to fold over each other during flat felling, so instead of stitching the hem through them, I skipped over them and just secured the hem to itself. Time for more felling to cover up all those raw edges. First, I trimmed down one side of the seam allowance very small, around 1/4 inch. Then I folded the other one over it and pinned both seam allowances to the garment beside the seam. They're secured in place with that same felling stitch. I did actually measure the seams in this kirtle, so that 10 yards of felling number is not coming out of nowhere. I fear, my captain dear, I fear will come to harm. Last night I saw the new moon clear, the old moon in her arms. Oh, be it fair, oh, be it foul, oh, be it deadly storm. Blow the winds wherever they may, our ship must sail the morn. The historically accurate choice for lacing cord would be a finger loop braid, but I was not up for teaching myself a whole new fiber art just to lace into my dress. I chose a braid I learned on hair, a 4-strand round braid, but done up in doubled strands of embroidery floss. Here's the finished kirtle in all its glory. While I don't recommend trying to pattern or fit one of these on yourself, this was a really fun project that provided me many hours of pleasant, relaxing hand sewing. There is still a fit issue I need to adjust. You can see here that the lacing is off-center because the kirtle twists to the side while I wear it. I think altering the opposite side seam should fix it, and thankfully, it's the one I haven't felt yet. I have plenty more quarantine sewing in the works. Like, subscribe, and ring ye old notification bell to keep up with my videos, and follow me on Instagram at MissSnappyDragon for more stitchy business. Stay well, stay home if you can, and happy sewing!